Well, now listen carefully. Confidence is not something you wake up with one morning like a gift from the universe. When it is not an emotion that visits you when life is easy and disappears when life becomes difficult. Confidence is a skill. And like every skill, it must be developed, trained, sharpened, and protected. Most people are waiting to feel confident before they act. When that is their mistake. Because feelings are unstable. They rise and fall with circumstances. One moment you feel strong. When? The next moment doubt enters your mind and suddenly everything changes. But a skill does not disappear because of a bad day. When? A skill stays with you because it has been practiced. Confidence is built when you move despite not feeling ready. When you show up again and again, even when your mind is telling you to stop speak, even when fear is whispering that you are not enough. That is where confidence begins to form. When? Not in comfort, but in resistance. And this is where time becomes your greatest ally or your greatest enemy. Because every single day, when you are either practicing confidence or you are practicing hesitation, time does not wait for you to feel prepared. Time moves. And if you do not learn how to maximize it, you will spend your life reacting instead of leading. The first key is understanding that action creates identity. You don't become confident and then act. You act. And then confidence follows. Every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. The second key is discipline. When? Discipline is what allows you to perform when emotions are weak. It removes negotiation from your life. When something must be done, when you do it. Not because you feel like it, but because it is necessary. The third key is repetition. Repetition builds familiarity. When and familiarity reduces fear. The more you do something, the less power it has over you. When? Confidence grows in the presence of repeated effort. The fourth key is preparation. Many people are not lacking confidence. They are lacking preparation. When you prepare deeply, you remove uncertainty. And when uncertainty is reduced, your mind becomes calm and focused. The fifth key is focus. Your time is your life in measurable form. Every distraction is stealing a part of your future. When you focus, you are telling your life where to go. The sixth key is self-control. Confidence without control is dangerous. True confidence is quiet, stable, and grounded. It does not need to prove itself to others. The seventh key is environment. You cannot grow in a place that constantly weakens you. When? Your surroundings must support your vision, not destroy it. The eighth key is consistency. It is not what you do once that changes your life. It is what you do every day. Confidence is the result of consistent behavior over time. The ninth key is patience. Skills take time to develop. You must allow yourself the process. Growth is not instant, but it is guaranteed if you remain committed. When? And the 10th key is ownership. You must take full responsibility for your time, your actions, and your results. No excuses. No blame. When? Just ownership. Because the moment you take ownership, you take control. When? And when you take control, confidence is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you are. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop allowing your emotions to dictate your actions. Build the skill. Protect your time. When? Train your mind and become the person who moves forward regardless of how they feel. Confidence is not a feeling that comes and goes. When it is a skill that stays because you built it. Confidence is built through action, not emotion, because emotion is unstable, when unpredictable, and often deceptive. If you wait for a feeling to guide your movement, you will spend most of your life standing still. When feelings rise when things are easy, and they disappear when things become uncomfortable. When that means if your confidence depends on how you feel, then your confidence has no foundation. It becomes temporary, fragile, when, and easily shaken by pressure, rejection, or uncertainty. But action is different. Action is something you can control. When action does not require permission from your emotions. It does not ask you whether you feel ready or not, but it simply demands that you move. And every time you choose to act, especially when you don't feel like it, you are sending a powerful signal to your mind. You are teaching yourself that hesitation does not control you, that fear does not define you, and that your decisions are stronger than your doubts. This is where true confidence begins to form. When not in moments of comfort, but in moments of resistance. When your mind tells you to wait, but you move anyway. When uncertainty tries to slow you down, but you continue forward. These moments may feel small at first, but they are not small at all. When they are the building blocks of identity. Every action you take becomes evidence. Evidence that you can handle pressure. When evidence that you can move without clarity. Evidence that you are capable of more than your emotions suggest. Over time, when this evidence begins to accumulate, and your brain starts to recognize a pattern, it starts to understand that you are someone who acts when not someone who hesitates. And once that identity is formed, confidence is no longer something you chase. When it becomes something that naturally exists within you, because it is supported by your history of action. When many people misunderstand confidence because they think it is a starting point. When they believe confident people act because they feel ready. But the truth is the opposite. Confident people feel ready because they have acted repeatedly in the past. Their confidence is not based on hope. It is based on proof. When proof created through consistent execution over time. When you rely on emotion, you become reactive. Your environment controls you. A bad day can stop you. A negative comment can shake you. A moment of doubt can delay you. But when you rely on action, when you become stable, you move regardless of circumstance. You continue regardless of how you feel. And that stability is what creates power. Action also removes overthinking. When you sit and wait for the perfect feeling. When your mind begins to create scenarios, doubts, and fears that were never real to begin with. But action cuts through all of that. When it brings you into reality, it forces you to engage, to learn, to adjust, and to grow. And in that process, when you realize something important, most of the things you feared were never as powerful as your mind made them seem. So instead of asking yourself, do I feel confident? You must begin asking, am I willing to act? Because that is the real question. When confidence is not something you wait for. It is something you build one decision at a time, one step at a time, one action at a time. And the more you act, the less power your emotions have over you. The less you hesitate, the stronger your identity becomes. Until one day you realize that confidence is no longer something you think about. It is something you demonstrate. Not through how you feel, but through how you move. Feelings fluctuate, they are inconsistent, reactive. When, and often influenced by things that have nothing to do with your true potential. One moment you feel motivated, clear, and unstoppable. When, the next moment without warning, doubt creeps in, energy drops, and everything that once felt possible suddenly feels heavy. When, if your identity is tied to these emotional waves, then who you are will constantly shift. When, you will become productive when you feel good and inactive when you feel low. You will start strong and stop early. You will depend on temporary states to produce permanent results, and that is a losing cycle. Discipline breaks that cycle. When discipline does not ask how you feel, it does not negotiate with your emotions. It operates on decision, not desire. When something needs to be done, discipline steps in and says, this is who we are, regardless of how we feel today. And in that moment, something powerful happens. You separate your identity from your emotions. Because identity is not built on how you feel. Identity is built on what you repeatedly do. When discipline becomes part of your life, your actions stop being random. They become predictable, structured, intentional. You begin to show up on days when motivation is absent. You continue when excitement fades. You execute when comfort is calling you to stop. And every time you do that, when you are reinforcing a new identity, an identity that is stable, reliable, and strong. Most people are controlled by feelings, which means they are controlled by circumstances. If the environment is good, they perform well. If the environment becomes difficult, they withdraw. But discipline creates independence. It allows you to perform in any condition. It allows you to stay consistent even when everything around you is uncertain. This is why discipline stabilizes identity. It removes inconsistency from your behavior. It creates a standard that does not change based on mood. It turns your actions into habits. And your habits into character. Over time, this character becomes your foundation. Not something temporary, but something deeply rooted. And once your identity is stabilized, your confidence strengthens naturally. Not because you feel confident but because you trust yourself. You trust that you will show up. You trust that you will do the work. You trust that you will not quit when it becomes uncomfortable. That trust is far more powerful than any temporary feeling of confidence. There is also a deeper level to this. Discipline trains your mind to follow commands instead of creating excuses. Without discipline, when your mind becomes your master, it tells you when to stop, when to delay, when to doubt. But with discipline, you reverse that relationship. You become the one in control. You give the command and your body follows. That level of control creates clarity, and clarity removes confusion. When you know what must be done and you do it without hesitation, when your path becomes clear, you stop wasting time debating with yourself. You stop losing energy to indecision. When you move forward with purpose, and over time, something shifts inside you. You no longer see yourself as someone who tries. You see yourself as someone who executes. That identity is powerful because it is not dependent on how you feel in the moment. It is built on a pattern of behavior that you have proven to yourself again and again. So when feelings fluctuate, and they always will, you remain steady. You remain grounded. You remain in motion. Because discipline has given you something emotions never could. Stability. Repetition creates certainty because the mind trusts what it sees consistently, not what it experiences once. The first time you do something, there is hesitation. The second time, there is still doubt. But as you continue, something begins to change. What once felt unfamiliar starts to feel normal. What once created fear begins to lose its intensity. And what once required effort begins to flow with ease. Uncertainty lives in the unknown. It grows in spaces where you lack experience. When you step into something new, your mind tries to protect you by questioning everything: your ability, your readiness, your chances of success. But repetition answers those questions without words. Every time you show up and do the work again. When you are replacing the unknown with experience, that experience becomes evidence. And evidence is what builds certainty. You don't become certain by thinking more. You become certain by doing more. Because thinking creates possibilities, but action creates proof. And the human mind is wired to believe proof over imagination. When you have done something once, when it feels possible, when you have done it 10 times, it feels familiar. When you have done it 100 times, it becomes part of who you are. This is why repetition is so powerful. It transforms skill into instinct. It removes the need to overanalyze. It allows you to operate with clarity and speed because your mind no longer has to figure things out from the beginning each time and already knows the path. And when the path is known, fear loses its power. Most fear is not real danger. It is lack of familiarity. It is the discomfort of stepping into something your mind does not fully understand yet. But repetition teaches your mind that there is no threat. It shows you again and again that you can handle the situation. And once your mind accepts that, it stops resisting you. This is when confidence begins to deepen. Not the loud, temporary kind that depends on mood. Stable kind that comes from knowing that you have done this before. Knowing that you can do it again. Knowing that even if something goes wrong, you have enough experience to adjust and continue. Repetition also builds control. In the beginning, your actions may feel scattered or uncertain. You may make mistakes, hesitate, or feel out of rhythm. But each repetition refines your movement. It sharpens your awareness. It improves your timing. Over time, when what was once difficult becomes controlled, and what was once slow becomes efficient. This process cannot be rushed. It requires patience, because certainty is not built overnight. It is built layer by layer through consistent effort over time. Every repetition adds another layer of confidence, another piece of evidence, another step toward mastery. Many people stop too early. They expect to feel certain after a few attempts. When they don't, they assume something is wrong. But the truth is, they simply haven't repeated enough. They are judging the process before it has had time to work. Consistency is what unlocks the power of repetition. Doing something once in a while will not create certainty. It must be done regularly, intentionally, and with focus. Each repetition must be treated as an opportunity to improve, not just to complete. And as you continue, you will notice a shift. The doubt that once filled your mind will begin to fade. The hesitation that once slowed you down will begin to disappear. In its place, there will be clarity. There will be confidence. There will be certainty, not because you hoped for it, but because you earned it. When your environment shapes your self-belief, because what surrounds you eventually enters you. The conversations you hear, when the standards you observe, the behaviors you witness daily, they do not stay outside. They begin to influence how you think, how you act, and ultimately how you see yourself, whether you realize it or not. When your environment is constantly sending you messages about what is normal, what is possible, and what is expected. If you are in an environment where people settle, complain, and avoid responsibility, that standard slowly becomes acceptable to you. When you may start with ambition, but over time, constant exposure to low standards begins to lower your own expectations. When you begin to question your goals, you begin to adjust your vision, not because you lack ability, but because your environment has redefined what feels realistic. On the other hand, when you place yourself in an environment where discipline is normal, where growth is expected, and where people take ownership of their actions, something different happens. You begin to rise. You begin to stretch your thinking. You begin to believe that more is possible for you, not because someone told you, but because you see it being lived out around you. Belief is not built in isolation. It is reinforced through exposure. What you see repeatedly becomes what you accept. And what you accept becomes what you believe you are capable of. This is why environment is so powerful. When it either expands your identity or limits it. It either pushes you forward or holds you in place. It either strengthens your confidence or slowly weakens it over time. Even the smallest details matter. The content you consume, the people you listen to, the spaces you spend your time in. All of these elements are shaping your internal dialogue. If you constantly hear doubt, your mind will begin to speak doubt. If you constantly see inconsistency, your actions will begin to reflect inconsistency. But if you surround yourself with focus, discipline, and clarity, when those same qualities begin to appear in your own behavior, your environment also affects your standards. And your standards determine your results. When you are surrounded by people who accept average, average begins to feel comfortable. But when you are surrounded by people who demand excellence, average starts to feel uncomfortable. You begin to push yourself. Not because you are forced to, but because your environment has raised your level of expectation. This is why protecting your environment is not optional. It is necessary. You cannot expect to build strong self-belief while constantly exposing yourself to negativity, distraction, and limitation. When it creates conflict within you. One part of you wants to grow, while another part is being influenced to stay the same. And that conflict drains your energy, slows your progress, and weakens your confidence. Sometimes, changing your environment does not mean physically leaving a place. It means changing what you allow into your mind. It means being intentional about what you watch, what you listen to, and who you give access to your attention. Because your attention is the gateway to your belief system. When you take control of your environment, when you take control of your influence, and when you take control of your influence, you begin to reshape your identity. Over time, when your self-belief starts to align with the environment you have chosen, you begin to see yourself differently. When you begin to think differently, you begin to act differently. Not because you forced confidence, but because you created a space where confidence could grow naturally. When preparation eliminates fear, because fear often comes from uncertainty, not inability. When you are unprepared, when your mind begins to imagine outcomes you cannot control, it fills the gaps with doubt, hesitation, and worst-case scenarios. You begin to question yourself, not because you are incapable, but because you have not given yourself enough evidence to feel grounded. When the mind fears what it does not understand, it resists what it has not experienced. And when you step into a situation without preparation, everything feels unpredictable. Your focus becomes scattered. Your thoughts become unstable. You start reacting instead of responding. And in that state, even simple tasks can feel overwhelming. But preparation changes everything. Preparation brings clarity. It reduces the unknown. It gives structure to what once felt uncertain. When you prepare, you begin to understand the situation before you even enter it. You anticipate challenges. When you think through possibilities, you strengthen your approach. And in doing so, you remove the element that feeds fear the most: unpredictability. When you know what you are doing, your mind becomes calm. Not because the situation is easy, but because you are ready for it. You have already spent time thinking, practicing, refining. When you have already faced the discomfort in private. So when the moment arrives in public, you are not starting from zero. When you are stepping into something familiar. This is why preparation creates confidence that feels different. It is not loud or emotional. It is quiet and steady. It does not rely on motivation. It relies on readiness. And readiness gives you control. Fear thrives in chaos. Preparation creates order. The more prepared you are, the less your mind needs to panic. It knows you have done the work. It knows you have considered the details. It knows you are not walking into the situation blindly. That awareness alone reduces tension. When it allows you to focus on execution instead of survival. Preparation also shifts your identity. When you prepare consistently, you begin to see yourself as someone who takes things seriously, someone who respects the process, someone who does not leave outcomes to chance. That identity strengthens your belief in yourself. Because you know you have earned your position. Many people try to eliminate fear by avoiding situations that challenge them. But avoidance does not remove fear, it reinforces it. Every time you avoid something, you are telling your mind that it was right to be afraid. And that fear grows stronger. Preparation takes the opposite approach. Instead of running away, you move toward the challenge with intention. You break it down. You study it. You practice it. And through that process, what once felt intimidating begins to feel manageable. It is important to understand that preparation does not mean perfection. You will never be fully prepared for every possible outcome, but you can be prepared enough to handle whatever comes. And that is what removes fear, not knowing everything, but knowing you can adapt. Because when you trust your ability to adjust, fear loses its grip. Preparation also builds momentum. The more you prepare, the more confident you become. The more confident you become, the better you perform. And the better you perform, the more evidence you create for yourself. That cycle strengthens over time when turning preparation into a habit and confidence into a natural result. So instead of asking how to feel less afraid, focus on becoming more prepared. Because fear does not disappear on its own. It disappears when you replace uncertainty with readiness.